this week's episode is going to be just a little bit different. You're going to hear the raw version of me, the version of me that is unprepared, unguarded, and a little bit unrestrained. I have to say, what I'm feeling right now is anger. I'm feeling anger, and I'm feeling disillusionment, and I'm feeling quite disgusted, as I know a lot of us probably are. And I want to acknowledge at the outset that I am likely preaching to the choir. I'm talking to a bunch of folks who did the right thing, who knew the challenge that was before us. They did not equivocate. They did not make excuses. They did not draw false equivalencies. And they got out there and did what needed to be done. But for the rest of y'all folks, I don't know. I don't know that I really have words to put to the feelings that a lot of us have been feeling for the last few days. I'm Dara Star Tucker, by the way, and this is The Breakdown. Find me on the KJLH Instagram page at Radio Free KJLH. Find me on my Instagram page at Dara Tucker B. It's been pretty active over there. I have not really posted a whole lot, but I've been putting a lot of stories up on my Instagram, just kind of trying to share a little bit about how I'm feeling right now. I've pretty much tuned out of the news. Can't really take a whole lot of hard news right now. The little bit of mainstream news that I have seen is blaming the Kamala Harris loss on the Democratic Party, that supposedly they don't know how to reach out to middle American voters. And this is a lot of what I'm having some frustration getting my head around right now, is the messaging that is coming out of this loss. And we all knew that if this happened, everyone would sort of paint the narrative of their own choosing. I made a post on Threads last week, really before the election. I said, I have a feeling we're going to have the black and blue dress, gold and white dress debate after this, that everyone is going to see what it is that they want to see. And that's just what happens. That's what happens in situations like this. You suffer a heavy loss, and everybody's got their reasons, their excuses. They're trying to figure out what to make of it. And one of my real issues right now is with the folks who did not vote for Kamala, but they did not vote for Trump. Okay? And y'all have heard me talk about these folks quite a bit. These people are very loud online. They have organized campaigns to crash the comment sections of people like me who do a lot of content around politics, who were supporting Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, labeling her a genocider, saying that she was equally responsible for the genocide in Palestine, or just these third-party voters who don't believe in the two-party system, advocating for Jill Stein, who a lot of people are starting to understand may be a Russian asset. Just a lot of folks saying a whole lot of different things. And for one reason or another, they were not putting their support behind Kamala Harris. But now these folks on the back end, it's almost like watching somebody set a building on fire, and then afterwards they want to come out and watch the building burn with those of us who are having to escape, and they want to sit and marvel at it. Oh my God, how horrible is this fire? Like, they want to kind of yummy up to the folks who are horrified right now. We are horrified at the thought of another 4 years of Trump and his authoritarian agenda, of Project 2025, of police immunity, of doing major cuts on Social Security and Medicare, of all the things that we know are going to come with Trump and his cronies being given the keys to this car. They want to come out and marvel at just how awful it's going to be. Oh my God, Trump, I can't believe. Oh, I can't believe what's about to happen. Like, those folks right now, I have to say, are pushing some very specific buttons with me, and I don't like it. I don't like it. Because a Trump supporter is one thing. At least they came out, and said, and those folks are real quiet right now, by the way. Trump supporters have a way of getting real quiet the day after an election. But, at least they put their money where their mouth was and said, this is the outcome that I want. This is who I'm voting for. But those folks who really wanted to stand on a moral high ground and wanted to be able to say that it didn't matter if they voted for the Democratic Party or the Republicans, all the parties are the same. I mean, we know they have some certain things in common. We know that there are a lot of issues with the Democratic Party, and we never should be of the mindset that we don't have the right to push back and criticize and fight and do what we have to do. But to kneecap Kamala Harris in the way that these folks have before she even had the chance to get into office, to even determine what her policies towards Gaza would have been, or the myriad issues that we know she would have had to face, we didn't even want to give her the chance to make her own statement. This woman who is capable, who is qualified, who has served at the federal level as vice president, who has served at the state level as district attorney, and who has served as attorney general. It's just unbelievable to me that we would have in any way considered Trump to be a fitting opponent for her, that he wasn't losing by double digits. It's just a testament to just this country. At the base of any explanation or argument as to what went wrong in this election, we have to begin with misogyny, and we have to begin by talking about white supremacy. And I'm not saying those are the only issues that impacted the outcome of this race, but if you are not willing to have an honest conversation about misogyny and about white supremacy and about xenophobia, if you are not willing to start the conversation, what went wrong, by talking about those things and being honest about the impact of those things on this race, then as far as I'm concerned, the conversation is over. If you want to start the conversation talking about the economy because that's what people said they cared about, then you're falling for the okie doke. But for a black woman, for black people, period, and for women, period, especially for a black woman, there is no way that you're going to pull the wool over our eyes about what really happened here. Okay, so the conversation begins there. That is the bedrock. When almost 60% of white men voted for Trump, and over 50%, 53% of white women voted for Trump, and they make up something like 60%, more than 60% of the electorate. We cannot have a conversation about what went wrong for the Harris-Walz campaign or what went right for Trump without having a conversation about what white people did. Okay? We're going to be honest. So we start there with the misogyny, because I don't think it's any coincidence that Trump handily beat two women. One of them, he did not win the popular vote, but with Kamala, he did, because we had the added factor of race. But I don't think it's any coincidence that Trump handily beat two women, but he had trouble beating a man. Now, we know that the circumstances were different. We were coming off of COVID, and obviously that had a lot to do with how people were feeling about him and his presidency at the time. But we are not going to discount race, and we are not going to discount the role that gender played here. Each one of us that are sitting here today assessing her campaign knows at least one man and probably a couple of women who did not and would not have voted for her, or who had a lot of backhanded stuff to say about her based upon the fact that she was a woman. And if you are a white person, you probably know several people who would not have voted for her because she was a person of color, because she was black and South Asian. And if you know people who would not have voted for her because she was black, and if you know people who had a very hard time voting for her because she was a woman, then there's no way that we can't argue that those things played a big role in what went wrong. And so now we start to tell the stories. Now we start to weave in the narratives about exactly what it was. And it's interesting that depending on who you are and what your background is and what is of importance to you, what your life experience is, that's going to have a lot to do with the narrative that you tell. Like I said, a lot of these left-wing folks who were really upset that she was reaching out to Republicans like Liz Cheney and touting the Dick Cheney endorsement, reaching out, and had all sorts of Republicans speaking at the DNC, people like Adam Kissinger and tons of people. She was really reaching out to that middle ground of the party. And you have a lot of progressive folks, left-leaning folks, who are very upset about that she did not make a more declarative stance on Gaza, and that she was working too hard to reach out to the middle. And they feel that that's where she went wrong. I can't turn on mainstream media without hearing analysis of how the Democratic Party is just out of touch with middle America, They're just out of touch. They're going too far to make these overtures towards the left part of the left wing of their party. They're too woke. They've become too woke. That's the lesson. That's the lesson we need to take away. And for her to get so many fewer votes than either Biden or Hillary Clinton got, for the Democrats to simply just not show up for her in the way that they just did not show up for her. 15 million fewer votes than what Biden got. That is an absence of something. There is a contingency of people that just didn't show up. And so it is very possible that the group of people who were very upset about her stance on Gaza, the Never Kamala people, it is very possible that that gap represents that group of people who just felt like a vote for Kamala Harris was a vote for a genocide, even though Congress is the one that approves funding for war. But the fact that she really wasn't willing to shift her position on Gaza from anything other than what Joe Biden had been saying, it's possible that group of people did make a significant dent and that they are the folks who didn't show up. But the fact of the matter is, when you don't show up, you do not have political power. You are erasing your own political power because a statement of absence is no statement at all. We can provide conjecture about who that group of people is that just didn't show up, that wasn't motivated enough to show up. As I understand it, the black vote was down as well. But we don't really know. And I don't know that it's possible to really know exactly who these people are that showed up for Joe Biden that did not show up for Kamala. So I don't know that that absence really makes any sort of a grand statement. And like I said, the mainstream folks and the pundits, and I'm sure Democratic operatives, will tell themselves the story that they need to tell themselves. And I would fear and would assume that the story that will come out of the absence of voters showing up is going to be that Kamala Harris did not make a connection with middle America, that she did not go far enough to reach, as they used to say, Joe the plumber. And the story's not going to be that she wasn't radical enough or that she wasn't far left enough. That's not going to be the story. And I kind of doubt that white supremacy will be the story or that misogyny will be the story, because they're not polling for that. If they can't see it in a poll, then they can't make further decisions around it. They cannot make determinations as to what they should do in response to this. Because nobody's asking, hey, did you not vote for Kamala because she's a woman? No one's really asking that. And if they did, how many people are really going to answer that question honestly? And certainly if someone stayed home, the question can't be asked at all. It's either a knowledge that you feel that you have, as I feel that I have, or it's something that you choose to ignore. It's something that you have to treat as fundamentally unknowable. Did Kamala Harris not win this contest because she was a black woman? We will never be able to answer that question conclusively. We will only be able to have conjecture about that. And that is truly disappointing because it's always going to be a debate and it never will be solved. What I can tell you is that whoever they run in 2028, without a shadow of a doubt, whoever they run in 2028 will be the blandest, whitest, Christianist, most middle of the road white man that they can find. I would be willing to wager everything I earned this year that they are not going out of their way to take any chances demographically with who they choose to run. Because these right-wingers, these MAGA folks have made it very clear that they are not in the mood for anything progressive, at least not right now, when things do change over time. And some people say, if we have elections in 4 years, I would probably lean more away from a lot of the catastrophizing of that sort. Are we going to have elections anymore? I would never discount that possibility. If you all watch my content online, and I hope you do, I'm on TikTok, Instagram, all those places. I'm doing a lot of commentary around this stuff, video commentary around this stuff. And I've done some specific commentary around the push towards fascism, Trump's authoritarianism, and some specific videos about, hey, can we call this maybe an early fascist movement? Is that what Trump is bringing? Is he bringing the kind of fascism that Hitler brought to Germany? As some of you all may know, my degree is in German studies. That is nothing that I take lightly. That is a conversation that I take very seriously. And I have made a couple of videos talking about the parallels between a lot of what Trump and his ilk, this Project 2025 stuff. I've done many videos on the dangers of Project 2025, the authoritarianism, this neo-fascist push. I take that very seriously, but I would caution people at the same time to be very careful about these wild, broad statements about supposedly our democracy being dead. They're going to take it all and we will have no democracy after this. I don't necessarily fall in line with a lot of the most extreme interpretations about what this election means for our republic or for democracy itself. But I do take it very seriously. What has happened it will be nothing short of catastrophic in many ways. There will be a lot of people who will lose their rights. They want to get rid of the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that was established by Lyndon Johnson. Pretty much every protection that was established in the Civil Rights Act, they want to get rid of it. Clarence Thomas wants to get rid of the Civil Rights Act. Clarence Thomas never felt like the Civil Rights Act should have even been passed. Okay, these are the kinds of folks we're dealing with. And for them to have control over the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch, we have extreme MAGA Republicans in control of all three branches of government. That is nothing short of catastrophic. But I would also caution against catastrophizing about what this man and his cohorts will be able to accomplish, because even with control of the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches, they will still be limited in what they can do. For instance, Trump has said many times that he wants to get rid of birthright citizenship. He wants to get rid of the idea that you can come to this country as a non-citizen and that you can have a child and that child will automatically be considered a citizen of the United States. He wants to get rid of that. Well, that, my friends, is in the U.S. Constitution. So he can make huge overtures like that as to what he is going to do, what he really wants to do. Folks, there can be 10,000 people in an arena that can scream and yell about mass deportations and all of this stuff. But we do still have a constitution. Okay? The Constitution has not gone anywhere. I'm sure a lot of these folks would love to get in there and tinker with it and edit it. But the fact of the matter is that it is very difficult to amend the Constitution. It is a very difficult thing to do. Now, will these people try to find every which way around the Constitution, executive orders, and taking control of the Justice Department, which is another provision that is included in this Project 2025 manual, to put the Justice Department under the jurisdiction of the executive branch, which essentially means that Trump will fully control the Justice Department. They will not be able to operate with independence, which means he will be able to go after anyone he wants to, and he will be able to prevent the Justice Department from coming after him and his cronies. So just because something is in the Constitution and you would need a constitutional amendment in order to get rid of it, that birthright citizenship I'm speaking of, just because it's in the Constitution, doesn't mean he might not find a way to at least temporarily. As far as I know, the Republicans will not have a 2/3 majority in the House or Senate. You need that in order to do a constitutional amendment. We have not had an amendment to the Constitution since the early 90s, if I'm remembering correctly. It's a difficult thing to do, especially in our fractured political landscape. There will be no amendments to the Constitution happening under a Trump presidency. They don't have the numbers for it. But he will find a way to do what he wants to do. He is going to be a menace for sure. I do not mean for one single solitary moment to minimize what this man is about, what he is capable of. People like Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon. And just, I watched an interview with his transition manager, whose name is escaping me right now, on CNN. This guy is a shyster. These guys are all billionaires who are dead set on enriching themselves and their billionaire buddies. Let's not even get into J.D. Vance. I've done a whole lot of content on J.D. Vance and his benefactor, Peter Thiel, and what their real agenda is with the Heritage Foundation. It just gets really deep. And let's not even start to ask questions about the Opus Dei sect of Catholicism that some of these Heritage Foundation people are connected with. This stuff, it runs very deep. What these people's actual plans are, they're even deeper than what a lot of us may realize. We know in the general vicinity of what it is that they want to accomplish, but I've covered that stuff ad nauseum on this show, and I've covered it ad nauseum in my online content. I've talked my voice off about it all year long. For almost a year, I and many other people have been talking about this stuff. And so if you are curious, you can go back through some of the annals of what I have done and what many others have done. If you're curious as to what we might be in store for, that information, I'm sure, is readily available. I don't really feel the need to run any of that down at this point, because I think there's really no use crying over spilled milk. The deed is done. The deed is done. But for those of you who did the right thing, who came out and cast your vote, I don't want us to be despondent. I mean, it's okay to heal, to grieve, to mourn. We're licking our wounds. We're comforting each other. I'm having so many conversations through my DMs on Instagram. There's folks reaching out. I've answered literally hundreds of DMs on Instagram, and I will continue to answer as many messages as I can. Some people just reaching out to say, I'm a white woman or whatever, and I'm so sorry that we let you all down, because Black women came through. As we know, 92% of Black women voted for Kamala Harris. We understood the assignment. Black men, almost 80% of Black men, as I understand it. Let's take our time to acknowledge another demographic that came through for Kamala Harris, and that is Jewish men and women. Jewish women were the second highest demographic to have voted for Kamala Harris at 88%. 88% of Jewish women voted for Kamala Harris. I'm sure Doug Emhoff had something to do with that. Something like 77% of Jewish men voted for Kamala Harris. So there were certain groups that understood the assignment. And let's give that credit where it's due. So I've dealt with many, many messages from folks wanting to commiserate, wanting to grieve, and to share our disappointment, to kind of ask questions about how to move forward, how to heal. A lot of folks I've been talking to, mostly on Instagram. And it's been a little bit exhausting, but it's been comforting as well to know that there are so many people who understand the severity of this loss, and it is a loss. A lot of people are saying that it's hitting them like a death. It took me probably a day and a half to exit the bed. I wasn't crying. I'm not giving nobody my tears over this. You're not going to catch me boo-hooing. No, ma'am, no, sir. But I did have that same feeling of when I've experienced deaths where I wanted to get really still, didn't really want to have a lot of interaction with people, wanted to just be able to process through it for at least a couple of days. And so, we're all working through it in our own way. And it actually does feel good to have a sense of community online. I did a live the following morning. I watched the results and I turned it off at about 10 p.m. Eastern time because I could see where it was going. And I started to allow myself to process through it then. It was just a full, as I'm sure most of you all know, just a bodily reaction against it, just the dread that came over me. It's almost something that I don't want to recount. And of course, it took us all back to 2016. Just that feeling of like, oh, dear God, this cannot be happening. Can our fellow Americans really want this again? Surely not. Surely not. What it really says to me, I think ultimately, is that we should never underestimate white supremacy, and we should never underestimate misogyny. I think there are a lot of other stories that can come out of this. Someone pointed out that pretty much any government that was in place during the pandemic recovery, any government that has had worldwide that has had to preside over the pandemic recovery and these high inflation rates, high prices for people keep talking about eggs, how much is a carton of eggs and all this stuff. Any government that has had to preside over these high inflation rates post-pandemic has been voted out. Pretty much any government that has had to preside over this post-pandemic economy has been voted out. So this sort of tracks. It stands to reason. And I heard someone say today, and I've said many times, Kamala Harris ran a near flawless campaign. I think we have been entirely too hard on her. I'm hearing people say her campaign was horrible, her messaging was terrible. It's like, that's easy to criticize in retrospect. If she loses, you can tell any story that you want to. I don't think her loss had a whole lot to do with her campaign being run poorly. I think they did a whole lot right. Of course, they did some things that were not as they should have been, as any campaign would have made its errors. That does not mean that she should have lost by millions. Doesn't mean that. There were some other factors that were at play. And like I said, any government that is in the same position as the Biden government has lost. And she was seen by a lot of people as being the incumbent. And it was very difficult to separate her from any culpability for the decisions that were made during the Biden presidency. Because, of course, she was the vice president, regardless of whether or not she was in the room making those decisions. She is seen as being connected with him, both in terms of the economy and in terms of any other issue that you can think of. But I thought it was very interesting statistically when people want to paint this picture about, it was Gaza. It was all the people that felt that their position on Gaza, they're supporting this genocide. And then when you see the polling, the issues that people voted on, hey, what's the most important issue to you? There were a myriad issues that came up before Gaza. I did not see Gaza even in the top 10 issues that people were voting for, not even with Gen Z. Gen Z actually voted for Trump at a pretty high rate. The top issues for most people were the economy. It was national security. It was immigration. All sorts of things. Abortion was there, but it was not even one of the top 5 issues. And I know a lot of folks were hoping that women would show up in full force and vote because of Roe v. Wade, because their rights to bodily autonomy had been taken away. And women did not, by and large, show up in that way, in the way that a lot of folks hoped that they would. So you just got to kind of wonder where people's heads are, because it feels like a lot of people are voting against their best interests. Voting to keep trans people out of bathrooms, voting to try to keep someone else from having something. Let's get those illegals out, get them out of our country. Because what? They're taking a gardening job that you were hoping for, turned in a resume for? I don't think so. It's a lot of protectionism is very evident, is very clear. And like I said, they were able to really closely tie Kamala Harris to the Biden presidency. And speaking of Biden, that is one of the things that surfaced really in the hours after we started to learn that Trump had indeed won this race. One of the first places that people went was Biden. The fact that he chose not to drop out and deny Democrats the opportunity to go through the process of nominating a replacement. Kamala Harris may have been very capable, may have been very much experienced and have run a great campaign. But if she is seen as being associated with Biden, that's already, she is already coming in at a handicap. And so if they had wanted to nominate someone like Gavin Newsom or Josh Shapiro, they at least would have come in with the perception that they had not been the cause of a lot of these economic and border issues that a lot of people were voting on. And it's hard to argue with that. That is a rationale that I will not make any attempts to equivocate about. If Joe Biden, and a lot of us thought he would drop out after one term, and he chose not to do it, because I think Joe Biden, at least up until the moment that he dropped out, he felt that he was the only one that could beat Trump. He would say over and over again when people would ask him, no, I've beat the guy once and I can do it again. And it really was I don't even want to call it an ego thing. I think he understood the threat that the country was facing. I think most people understood the threat that Donald Trump poses. And he did not want to do anything that would cause instability within the Democratic Party. He really felt like, I feel that Joe Biden felt he was doing the right thing, that he had this sense that he was the only one that could save this country from Donald Trump. But what he wasn't acknowledging was that he had aged out. He had really started to experience some mental and physical decline. And so this is what we're left with, folks. We are left with the results of a lot of unfortunate decisions having been made by both the Democratic Party and, I'll say it again, white folks in general. And don't think that because the Hispanic community, there's a lot of conversations about the Latino community and the part that they played in it, particularly Latino men voting in the majority for Trump. But don't think that just because there are Latino men that voted for Trump and because there are black men that voted for Trump, that this is not an issue of white supremacy, because it can be an issue of proximity to whiteness or the assumption that white supremacy is going to do something for you. People of color can support white supremacy. OK, let's just look at Tim Scott and Candace Owens and some others, Herschel Walker, for proof of that. And don't think that because there were plenty of women that supported Trump, that this did not have everything to do with misogyny. Because women can and do uphold misogyny. Make no mistake about it. We are not going to point to the fact that women voted for him and say, no, this is not about her being a woman. Oh, it very much is. Because we all know, anyone under the sound of my voice knows plenty of women who are full of misogyny, would not vote for a woman, had no intention of voting for her, and were just as anti-woman when they found out that she was running and probably had as many derogatory comments about her as these Republicans did. So America has decided who it is in this moment. America has decided what it wants. I don't think a lot of these people, to be honest about it, there is so much misinformation and disinformation out there. And I may do an entire episode on the misinformation ecosystem, on this bro culture, the manosphere, which had a whole lot to do with popularizing Trump in certain circles. The Elon Musks and the Joe Rogans and the Andrew Tates and so many more, all these podcasts and these gamers and folks who are doing all of this commentary that is directed at men, a lot of white men, but directed at men in general, that has a lot of influence over our politics. And it would be a mistake to not acknowledge how influential those people have been. I saw someone, a mutual of mine named Christian Divine today, who is a TikToker, who was saying, if you are a leftist and you are a man, if you are left-leaning and you are a man, start a podcast. We know that it's a cliched thing to do, to start a podcast. Now everybody says there's too many podcasts going, don't start a podcast. No, if you're a left-leaning man, you should be in that space, because that is where they are reaching a lot of men. And if you are someone who listens to podcasts, or if you are a gamer, chances are you are going to be what they call red-pilled. You are going to be red-pilled, meaning being pulled over to these far-right ideologies. You're going to get the red pill if you are into podcasts, if you are into gaming. Talk radio is another part of it. Like I said, I want to do an entire breakdown on just the manosphere, the red pill culture, Elon Musk, those folks, and how influential they were on normalizing Trump for men, just men in general. And so, yeah, we have a lot to process. We have a lot to think about. But I really want to reiterate with you all. We're seeing a lot of folks in the online space who are making videos about particularly black women and stuff. We're done carrying all of y'all. We're done supporting you all. We show up for you and you don't show up for us. And all I care about right now is black folks. And I empathize with that. I feel that on a deep level. But if we take the stance that I'm taking my toys and going home, then we're no better than a lot of these protesters who said that they cared about Gaza and who waylaid and kneecapped Kamala Harris and now have left Gaza in a position where Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, will be setting up housing developments in Gaza. We are cutting off your nose to spite your face. If we start to divest from supporting at least the best possible candidates that we can, if we start pulling our support, who gets hurt? You know who gets hurt first? My disabled neighbor who is an immigrant. Immigrants get hurt. Disabled people get hurt. Black people get hurt. Any person of color is going to get hurt. Gay people get hurt. Trans people get hurt. If we divest, we hurt ourselves. And that's the hard part of all of this, of being a part of any sort of justice movement, is that as much as it can break your heart, and this has broken a lot of people's hearts, we cannot divest. And we can't turn back, and we can't sit down in the middle of the road. We can take time to heal. We can take time to regroup. We can take time to think and to nourish ourselves and to divest for a while. Yeah, I've been watching Frasier reruns. I have not been watching the news. I don't want to hear nothing more about how this next, regime. I don't want to hear nothing about how this regime is getting ready to take over. You know, I know that I need to be informed, and I will slowly start to plug in to the best of my ability as time goes on. But yeah, let's take the time to heal. And then let's regroup and figure out exactly what the next step is, you know, when we're ready. But I want to encourage you all that all is not lost. Do not fall prey to despair. You can be discouraged, but do not despair, because all is not lost. We still have power. We have the ability to organize. Just as the MAGA folks were a thorn in the side of the Biden administration, his entire 4 years in office, they were a thorn in the side of the Barack Obama administration. His 8 years in office, we can be a thorn in the side of another Trump administration for his next 4 years in office. That is our job. Our job is to be a thorn in their flesh, you know, and a whole lot can be done. And if history plays out as it usually does, then there will be an opportunity in a couple of years to take back the House and or Senate, because the pendulum just tends to swing the other way. Folks see what it's like to live under an administration, a regime, and if things go in the direction that we all pretty much know they're going to go in, then all these folks, even a bunch of the ones that voted this stuff in, are going to be getting real tired of it pretty soon. And that will start to evidence itself, and they're going to be looking for something else. So let's not just assume that it's all going in the direction that these people want it to go in. No, we have the power. We have the power to fight, and we are going to slowly but surely climb out of this and figure out our way into a reality that makes a little bit more sense for us. And we know where the Supreme Court is going. Realistically, we know that the Supreme Court will be very conservative for the next 25 years. But foreseeably, potentially for the next 30, 40 years. This is the result. When people say all the parties are the same, doesn't matter if I vote, all of these just completely useless and unhelpful attitudes that people like to take around their participation in our democracy, it is unhelpful because it has real life consequences for real people that you care about. If you have a mother that is on Social Security, it has real life consequences for her. If you are a first time home buyer, it has real world consequences for you. If you are a disabled person and you have someone messing with the Equal Opportunity Commission, taking away those rights, taking all of that language and verbiage out of government documents, that has real life consequences for you, especially in this extremist environment. So I need us to get out of that mindset. I need us to go ahead and take our time to heal, and then we're going to get back up on this horse, and we're going to be okay. I want to thank you all for plugging into the breakdown through this entire election season. Those of you who have been vigilant, who have been following the show, who have been listening to the podcast all over the place. I want to thank you all for walking through this with me, and we're going to continue. I'm not going anywhere. I assume that y'all ain't going nowhere, and we are going to get through these next 4 years together. We're going to get through it together, and we're going to be okay. Thank you all so much for listening. My name is Dara Star Tucker. Remember to find me on the KJLH Instagram page at Radio Free KJLH. You can find me on my personal Instagram at Dara Tucker B. That's DARA. TUCKER and the letter B as in boy, Dara Tucker B. You can find me everywhere else at Dara Star Tucker. That's Dara with one R and Star with two. I'm looking forward to walking out these probably pretty difficult years with you, but we're going to do it side by side. Thank you all so much for listening. We will see you all next week. And until then, let's learn to shout.